In a distracting world of 64-player battle royales, canvas bags, and piss mushrooms, it's easy to forget just how perfect Portal was, and how good Portal 2 was as well, for that matter, expanding on the characters, lore, and humour of what could have turned out to be just a very straight-faced 3D puzzler. For anyone who hasn't played the game, firstly, how, why, what are you doing? Portal follows a strong and silent human woman as she traverses Aperture Science's Enrichment Center, overseen by an omnipotent central computer called GLaDOS. It has rightly been ranked amongst the best video games of all time. The woman, incidentally, is named Chell, the pronunciation of which has always been a point of contention amongst players. Admittedly, I've always been in camp Shell, but in an unused line of dialogue from Portal 2, GLaDOS actually says,
"I'm going to kill you, Chell."
Now, various developers have used both pronunciations interchangeably in interviews, so I'm convinced that both are acceptable, but for the avoidance of a comment section shitstorm, I'll stick with GLaDOS's Chell pronunciation for this video. Everyone be calm. Now, where were we? While we've never received a magic third game in the series, a number Valve continues to struggle with, both Portal and its sequel have tons of fun secrets and behind-the-scenes details to find, and are generally stuffed with interesting facts about its characters, world, and development too. So in place of a third installment that we're never ever getting, we thought we could at least satiate your hankering with a bunch of lesser-known Portal tidbits that we find quite interesting. Will that do in place of Portal 3? Probably not, but anyway, I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 things you didn't know about Portal. Number 10. Narbacular Drop. You may not be surprised to learn that the inspiration for a game named Portal about portals was in fact a game with a portal mechanic. When free-to-play game Narbacular Drop was released by Nuclear Monkey Software, it turned out to be a short but sweet dungeon crawler with just 6 portal-based puzzles to solve and no save mechanic. The game was more a proof of concept than anything else, but the humour that would later define the Portal series itself was still in there, with the main character being named Princess No Knees, for example, referencing the fact that she couldn't jump. Having a title containing an entirely made-up word, Narbacular Drop was so named in order to take advantage of search engine results, seeing as their game would basically be the only result found when typed into Google, which I think is a totally narbacular idea. Valve's co-founder, Gabe Newell, loved the game concept so much that he immediately brought the developers in to work on a new title containing these same ideas of portal-y puzzles. A few elements were even directly carried over, namely the orange and blue auras surrounding the portals, used as a way for players to differentiate between the two. Then, once Portal 1 had become a smash hit, despite being the product of a pretty small team, Valve had dozens of their other employees coming forward asking to work on the sequel, meaning that they had a lot of money and talent to make the follow-up just as good, if not better. Number 9. The movie deal. While we wait out the next 1,000 years, hoping that one day a third Portal game will be announced, there are other avenues that might gift us more from the franchise. In 2011, a 7-minute fan film entitled Portal No Escape was released on YouTube, directed by Dan Trachtenberg. The video was a huge success. As of spring 2020, it has over 25 million views, and it attracted the attention of known video game lover and Star Wars sequeler J.J. Abrams, who not only brought on Trachtenberg as a director for Bad Robot Productions' 10 Cloverfield Lane, but also set up a movie deal with Valve for both the Portal and Half-Life series. While this all happened way back in 2011, hopes for its eventual production are still high, especially if this 2016 IGN interview with Abrams is anything to go by. We have a meeting coming up next week with Valve. We're very active. I'm hoping that there will be a Portal announcement fairly soon. Although he later clarified, we've got writers and we're working on both those stories, but nothing that would be an exciting update. Now, nearly 4 years have passed since that interview, and while J.J. Abrams is currently very busy putting lens flare into everything he can get his hands on, I would probably have expected another update by now, so who's to say if it's ever going to happen. But hey, we can dream, right? Number 8. Alternate endings. During playtests of Portal 1, when faced with the fake ending segment on the conveyor belt into the Room of Fire, instead of escaping via a portal, some testers were happy to ride right on into it, seemingly content with a dark ending. So, according to Portal 1 and 2 writer Eric Volpor, in Portal 2 they decided to cater to that rather niche crowd by including some creative alternate endings. One of these took place within the first 2 minutes of the game, resulting in Chell's death, overlaid by a sad song reflecting on those 2 minutes of gameplay. Another ending allowed Chell to portal onto the surface of the moon quite early on in the game, where she'd promptly asphyxiate to death to the song Exile Vilify by The National, which was specifically written for Portal 2. Unfortunately, while these endings were very popular with the playtesters who discovered them, they never made it to the final game, mainly due to the designers overestimating how many great, funny endings they could come up with to properly litter throughout the runtime. Still, portaling to the moon ended up being an integral part of the real closing moments of the game, so that wasn't wasted, and even the sad moon song itself made it into the game, playing out of the radio in one of Ratman's dens. Interesting. Number 7. Turret Bullets. With the words
I see you.
And
Are you still there?
still haunting us in the dead of night when we've just switched off the lights, relax, it's probably just a clown. The haphazardly balanced egg-shaped turrets are a mixture of innocence and malevolence we've not seen since HAL, with their sing-song voice, apologetic nature, and little cries of when they're knocked over. In video games where your character is shot at, we usually suspend our disbelief just enough to accept that those bullets will only cause a small amount of damage, unlike real bullets which would usually just, kill you. However, Portal has a secret explanation as to why Chell is able to withstand hails of bullets from these little white death machines without sustaining any lasting damage. Aside from their personality core, empathy generator, and empathy suppressor, which are all tiny and located just above the guns, the majority of the turret's body is hollow. Why? Well, in one of his Aperture investment opportunity videos released by Valve in 2011 to advertise Portal 2, Cave Johnson reveals that instead of loading the turrets like a normal gun, this hollow casing is actually filled to the brim with loose ammunition, which is fired in a rather unconventional way. While normal guns ignite the gunpowder inside the bullet casing, firing the bullet out at speed, the turrets instead use a spring-loaded piston to eject the entire bullet still inside its casing for, quote, 65% more bullet per bullet. Because of this interesting strategy, Chell isn't so much being shot at as having hundreds of whole bullet shells slingshotted at her from close range. Now, while that would still bloody hurt and definitely have her floored after a period of sustained fire, it certainly explains why she's able to shake off any damage if she's able to find cover. Number 6. Atlas and Peabody. The hapless Laurel and Hardy of the robot world, Atlas and Peabody are the Aperture Science test subjects GLaDOS brings in to replace Chell after she realizes the benefits of having test subjects who won't die when they fall into a vat of acid after misfiring a portal and falling off a light bridge. However, they were not the first choice of character for Portal 2's co-op mode. Instead, the original idea was to have Chell and another female test subject called Mel go through the tests. This ultimately came to nothing, however, because the designers weren't able to come up with a clever enough reason to explain away Chell and Mel respawning after falling into said vat of toxic waste. So they instead decided to have the co-op characters be 2 robots that GLaDOS could easily reassemble upon failure. This thrown together aspect of their in-game character is also shown through their design, since GLaDOS only has limited scrap and materials at her disposal. Atlas's body is therefore a discarded personality core, while Peabody's body is made with an old sentry turret, probably with a few leftover bullets still rattling around inside him, if the last entry is anything to go by. Number 5. The Cake. A relic of an internet era when memes weren't this, everyone now knows that the cake is a lie. Now, while memes are entertaining, oh god, I sound like a news reporter at Area 51. Now, while memes are entertaining, this one did irreparably tarnish what is, in the context of the game, actually a rather horrific revelation that not all players would have found. After GLaDOS's continued assurance that once the test is over, there will be cake, finding this message scrawled in the den of a former Aperture Science employee known as Ratman reveals to whoever reads it that GLaDOS, a computer who up to this point has been seemingly harmless, if a little sardonic, is going to kill you. The cake is a lie. But what if I told you that the cake was not a lie after all? Well, in the game, it definitely is. I know there's an actual cake in the basement, but GLaDOS never intended to let you have a piece of this. However, in reality, the cake is very much real. It was actually inspired by a specific Black Forest Gatto cake sold in the Regent Bakery and Cafe in Washington, just down the street from Valve HQ. The in-game model bears a striking resemblance to the real cake, with a ring of red cherries and a liberal coating of chocolate flakes, which sounds like it would be delicious, if you like chocolate, which I don't. I'll settle for a can of Ratman's beans, I'm fine, don't worry about me. Number 4, Chell's family. Portal 1 didn't delve very deep into the backstory of Aperture Science and its inhabitants, focusing more on Chell's present danger at the hands/wires of GLaDOS. And while Portal 2 did explore more about the facility, its founder Cave Johnson, and GLaDOS herself, there's still a lot we don't really know about Chell. GLaDOS does continually describe her as an orphan, and she's unlikely to be lying, but I suppose could be. But in any case, how did Chell end up in the lab in the first place? Well, while traversing the abandoned Aperture offices, you find a room dedicated to a Bring Your Daughter to Work Day event, where several science fair projects are lying about. Most of these are potato clogs, but one specific one has, over however many years it's been, grown into a monstrous form and rooted itself to the ceiling and floors of the room, apparently due to something special from Dad's work, according to its author. Interestingly enough, this particular project is signed by Chell. Now, Chell is not exactly a common name. It's certainly rare enough that nerds want to knife each other over its pronunciation, so it's easy to deduce that this was done by our Chell, which means that she was the daughter, adoptive or biological, of an employee at Aperture. But that's still not all, because if you look carefully at the background of the painting of Carolyn and Cave, you can see a third face. Now, I personally, along with many others, think this is just a statue, but there is a subsection of the Portal community that thinks Chell is the illegitimate child of Cave and Carolyn, and that this is her in the background. As I say, I personally don't think the painting is proof of this, but the theory still makes a little sense, especially considering GLaDOS's change of heart about Chell once she remembers her true identity. Now, without any official confirmation, it's still entirely speculative, but either way, I love a good fan theory. Number 3, the protagonist. As mentioned earlier, Mel was a proposed second character for Portal 2's co-op mode, but here's an even wilder fact: she was originally going to be the main character for the whole game. With Chell having escaped the laboratory, and keep in mind that this was before the POV dragged back into the lab ending that was added later, Valve wanted to move on to another character, helpfully named Mel. The game was to start with the player facing a mirror to show them they were no longer playing as Chell and were part of a brand new person's story. However, as we also mentioned earlier, oh look at us interlinking our facts, playtesters had a lot to say about Portal 2's initial builds, and in this case felt somewhat forgotten about when GLaDOS finally appeared in the game and didn't recognise them as the same person who destroyed her last time. As a result, Mel was removed from the single-player game and tentatively kept in the back pocket for use in the co-op, but we all know by now how that went as well. Then, in order to bridge the gap between Chell's escape in Portal 1 and her return in Portal 2, Valve patched in the aforementioned Portal 1 ending scene, in which she is dragged back into the lab after one brief, sweet look at the outside world. Number 2, a prequel? The addition of Mel wasn't Valve's only idea on how to mix up the series. Portal 2 was to take a leaf out of, well, seemingly every franchise's book, and B, a prequel, exploring the ins and outs of Aperture during its heyday in the 1980s. This meant that there wasn't going to be any GLaDOS, any Chell, or any of the ruined Aperture laboratories or offices that you got to explore at the end of the first Portal. Instead, our favourite combusting citrus fruit enthusiast Cave Johnson was going to take the helm as the main villain, supposedly rocking a cowboy hat. But without GLaDOS, how would we get our fix of AI? Well, the writers had us covered, with a small GLaDOS cameo in the form of the Gyroscopic Liability Absolver and Disk Operating System, referred to by her friends as Betty. This small eye stalk of a personality core welded onto a Half-Life office lamp would follow Cave Johnson around and, after every test was explained to the player, rattle off a disclaimer that would, as her name implies, absolve Aperture of liability for any injuries incurred. An apparent predecessor to her murderous older sister, Betty was adorable, but ultimately scrapped when developers moved away from the prequel concept. And number 1... Wait, what does that say? What? No portals? The strangest idea that came out of Portal 2's early development entailed removing something so integral that it gave the series its name in the first place. Yes, as bizarre as it seems, the actual portaling mechanic that birthed the entire franchise in the first place was nearly scrapped for Portal 2. This was revealed to a baffled audience during the 2012 Portal 2 post-mortem panel at GDC. The developers were apparently planning to replace the portally action with that of an all-new mechanic known as the F-stop. They stated in the GDC panel that this was birthed from early design experiments for the new game, but chose not to divulge what it actually entailed in case it came in useful one day for a future game. Speculation was rife for a while. The term f-stop itself actually relates to a number used in camera operation, referring to the reciprocal of a device's relative aperture. You see? Aperture, it's all coming together. For this reason, fans theorized for many years that the f-stop gameplay might have entailed some kind of photography-related puzzle mechanic. And then, in December 2019, everything was exposed. As in like exposure on a camera. According to this video by Box and Rocks from Lunchhouse Software, f-stop, officially known as aperture camera, entailed using photography to replicate objects in the world, change their scale, and place them back into the room for you to interact with. Personally, I think the recent footage of indie developer Matt Stark's so-called Polaroid effect is actually a much more impressive bit of tech, but in fairness, we're nearly 10 years on from Portal 2 now, so developments have inevitably been made. Either way, take a good look. This is what Portal 2 could have been, but never was. The f-stop is a lie. And that's our list. But do you know any other hot and fresh science facts about Portal 1 or 2? Let us know in the comments below. You can follow myself and TripleJump on Twitter here, and if you want to support the things you enjoy, then check out the rewards on our Patreon. Finally, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I've been Peter from TripleJump, and thanks for watching.